The time between Timothy Dalton's last Bond film and Pierce Brosnan's first was a mess. Box office problems, botched deals, contract violations, and lawsuits that took years to settle meant that no Bond films could be made for years. Add to that the changing political landscape, including, the fall of the Soviet Union, and a lot of people were wondering if spy stories even had a place in the world anymore. All this meant that when the lawsuits were settled and it was time to get back to work, the Bond producers had to make something special. This next movie couldn't just be okay. James Bond needed a grand reopening. And you know what? They did it. Hello and welcome back. I'm the Big Shot Critic, and today it's the season finale of Bond vs. Bond, The First Outings. That's right, today we're covering Brosnan's debut in the role, GoldenEye. And I'm going to say this right up front, I think Brosnan's debut as Bond was the best debut in the role since Connery himself. We're going to talk about the mess leading up to GoldenEye, we're going to talk a little about the movie itself and Brosnan's tenure, and then we're going to talk about other factors in GoldenEye's massive cultural impact. What other factors, you might ask? This. I'm talking about this. But first, the mess. After License to Kill, it wasn't such a bad thing that the whole franchise had to pause. At the time, I'm sure it was very frustrating for the fans and the producers, but I'm not sure there would be a James Bond franchise today if the whole franchise didn't pause. License to Kill was Timothy Dalton's final Bond film. It didn't do that well at the box office for a Bond movie. Now, I've always heard that it faced really intense competition in the summer of 1989, and that's why ever since then, Bond movies come out around November. That's what the Bond people always said. Well, I finally took a look at the numbers myself. Did License to Kill have really tough competition that summer? Yeah, it really did. The way they scheduled it, you can tell that they were planning around Lethal Weapon, Ghostbusters, and Indiana Jones. Aside from Lethal Weapon hanging on surprisingly long, that all went as planned. But if you ask me, it looks like they were blindsided by Batman, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and even When Harry Met Sally. All three of those had incredible numbers, suggesting very strong word of mouth, and they would have had more than expected market share. The competition was genuinely insane. However, the numbers for License to Kill also tell a different story. A 42% second weekend drop. Woof. In the fourth weekend, it loses almost a third of its screens, and the theater average still drops by almost 20%. Its last two weekends both have 40% drops. And it's only in theaters for about 6 weeks. What does all that mean? Competition wasn't the problem. This movie failed on its own. Now, it's a good movie, not that dissimilar from Lethal Weapon 2, which was singing songs at the box office. I think people were going into License to Kill expecting a lighter tone. The previous 9 entries were all way lighter, and License to Kill is still the darkest one in the series by far. It wasn't uncommon at the time for people to bring their kids to Bond movies. Those folks would have left very disappointed. People would have gone in wanting lighter, expecting lighter. And they only got half of them. I'm sorry, that's a little joke. I think people were disappointed because they were expecting it to be more lighthearted, and it wasn't. On top of the box office problem was the MGM problem. MGM finances and distributes the Bond movies, but MGM is like that hard-living uncle who always tries to hitch you up for some cash. It seemed like the company was in a perpetual state of financial ruin for decades, honestly. If I had a nickel for every time MGM's financial woes delayed a Bond movie, I would have... 2 nickels for sure, but it seems like more. In 1990, a shady Italian Wolf of Wall Street type named Giancarlo Peretti bought MGM and had it belly up within a matter of months. It was an absolute clown show that included a legal battle with the Bond people after he tried to sell off distribution rights without honoring their contract. The lawsuit alone took more than 2 years to resolve, with MGM finally on its feet and ready to finance again, more than 4 years after the shady Italian bought the company. Mr. Peretti faced several criminal charges related to his purchase and mismanagement of MGM, but fled to Italy. To this day, he hasn't served a day for his crimes, despite being convicted on some charges in the US and France. He walks here and there, they say, disguised as a traveling vendor selling suspiciously cheap James Bond DVDs. Sometimes found in the foggy hills of central Italy, always vanishing if you say words like creditor too loudly nearby. Some say that at night, near his hometown, if you follow the sound of bounced checks and leveraged debt, you can find him dressed as a bookie, offering tantalizing bets on wine futures. All we know for sure is he came in, made a huge mess, and buggered off to Italy.
Enjoy it, while it lasts.
Very words I live by.
And on top of the MGM problems, there was the political landscape problem. By the time MGM was ready to roll, the Soviet Union was already gone for 2.5 years. Mind you, the Soviet Union itself was never the villain in any Bond movie, but back then, when people think of spy movies, they think of the Cold War. The Cold War gave birth to James Bond. A lot of people figured the end of the Cold War spelled death for James Bond. This was truly the closest the series ever came to dying. Quite the mess they had to deal with. Another movie was going to be made. That was never a question for the producers. But would it be good enough to keep the series alive? When all was said and done and everyone could return to filmmaking again, Cubby Broccoli was ready to bring Dalton back for more. Dalton was interested in doing a third and no more. But Broccoli told him, you can't come back after a 6-year break and only do one. Dalton agreed that would be foolish, but he didn't want to do any more, so he officially stepped down from the role in 1994. This was a very amicable separation. It was decided well before the official announcement, but Broccoli asked him to help out by staying on board and keeping the brand image strong until they were ready to get their new Bond. Of course, Dalton was happy to help. There was no great drama in getting Pierce Brosnan for the part. He was their first choice before, and he was their first choice now. That part of the process all went down without a fuss. As for Martin Campbell directing, there's not a lot of information as to why he was chosen. It's clear the producers were particularly impressed with a miniseries he had done about 10 years before called Edge of Darkness. That's one that Martin Campbell himself adapted into an American film in 2010 with Mel Gibson. Usually the Bond producers go after some kind of reputation that the director has, but here I guess they just thought he was the right guy for the material, because as far as I can tell, before Bond, he didn't really have any kind of strong reputation. He was just that guy who did that neat miniseries a few years back. Another really interesting choice was Eric Serra for the music. It's unlike any other Bond score. Tons of synth and ambient sound. I like it quite a bit and think it helps GoldenEye stand out among the other Bond films. It strengthens the tone of Soviet shadows that loom across the whole story. It just becomes part of the whole GoldenEye package. It would be a totally different movie without it, and worse, if you ask me. That said, Sarah's music was a little too out there for the producers. When the final mix was happening, the editing team, who had worked on previous Bond films, staged a full-on revolt. They were just dead unhappy with some of the score, to the point where they refused to finish their work unless something was done. With 1 week to release, the producers reached out to John Altman, who had orchestrated and conducted Sarah's score, and asked him to rescore the tank chase scene with proper James Bond fanfare. This was a Friday, and they told him Tuesday was the latest he could record. He said he composed Saturday, arranged the score Sunday, gave it to the copyist on Monday, recorded Tuesday, and it came out on Friday. Insane. And that tank scene is one of the all-time great action scenes, not just in Bond, but anywhere. The movie came together like a dream. It's not just the tank scene either, although that is the best in the movie. I think we have Martin Campbell to thank for the spectacular action because his 2 Bond films have the best action in the series. It's all staged so well to make use of the sets and characters. Somehow it feels naturalistic and bombastic at the same time. The final fight between 006 and Bond is what solidifies 006 as my favorite Bond villain of all time. They say it was inspired by the fight between Bond and Red Grant in From Russia with Love, which makes sense because Grant is my second favorite Bond villain because of that fight. It's so rare for Bond to have a physical match in the main villain, and I think it's so special every time they pull it off. As close as it comes, the movie is not flawless. There's some really obvious ADR near the middle when Wade leads Bond to Yanis, and the whole 20-minute segment in there is just too busy and blurry. Just like the last 20 minutes in The Living Daylights, it's overplotted. I've seen this movie at least 15 times, and I still can't tell you exactly how Bond is led to Yanis through Valentine. The movie is also the first to reintroduce the Aston Martin DB5 as a throwback element. The car was originally featured in Goldfinger, famously, and then reused in Thunderball, the very next film. It returns here, which is fine, maybe even fun for GoldenEye on its own. But then it comes back again in Tomorrow Never Dies, and again in Casino Royale, and again in Skyfall, and again in Spectre, and again in No Time to Die. Can we just leave it alone for a while, please? It's too much. Speaking of cars, some people take issue with GoldenEye's Bond car, the BMW Z3. Mostly complaining it's not exotic enough and Bond never uses its gadgets. There's something to the argument that it's not exotic enough, but business is business and that's the product placement deal they struck. It's still a fun car, even if it is pedestrian by Bond standards. I should know, I owned one for a while. And Bond didn't get to use the gadgets on the car because the deal was made too late in pre-production. They didn't have time to write anything in, except Q's description of the missiles we'll never see. And that is our segue into finally discussing Pierce as Bond. His Q scenes are great. We're going to start there. Brosnan's Bond has the best Q scenes, bar none. He's delivering the best lines, he's having the most fun, and his chemistry with Desmond Llewellyn is not only visible on the surface, it's impossible to miss.
Your new telephone. Talk here, listen here.
So that's what I've been doing wrong all these years.
In each scene they did together, you can feel how much fun these two were having, along with everyone else. The concept of the Q scene may have been born in Goldfinger, but it was perfected here with Pierce and Desmond, and they have not been outdone. That sharp sense of fun is sort of the hallmark of Pierce's tenure as Bond. It's not the broad comedy and warm charm of Roger Moore. It's punctuated. It's pointed. It's specific. Brosnan's Bond is occasionally very cold, but it doesn't feel inappropriate or out of place because his humor is precise in its delivery. It's targeted in the context. Moore and Brosnan are thought of as the light-hearted ones. But Moore's Bond is a charming presence who happens to be a spy. Brosnan's is an efficient spy who happens to make light of some things. Just one more element I want to mention, the Folly footsteps. I don't know why, but I love good Folly footsteps in any movie. There's something about it I find so satisfying. Am I the only one who loves this? Ooh, that's so great. Isn't that so great? So eventually, this movie had to come out. There were major obstacles from the box office, MGM, and world events, but the producers gave it their best shot. They pulled together a great crew and a great cast. It was a little messy, but everyone did their best work. Derek Meddings pulled together some insane in-camera shots with matte paintings. People jumped off dams. Danny Kleinman made his first of 8 title sequences he has now done. Tina Turner sang, and somebody got the French to lend them a real state-of-the-art military helicopter. And then the movie came out. It was a hit. It opened at number 1. It was the 4th biggest opening of 1995. It was the 6th biggest movie of 1995. James Bond's grand reopening was a success. He would live to fight another day. or die another day. The franchise was saved. Pierce Brosnan's debut as Bond was huge. Probably the most successful Bond debut since Connery himself. People weren't doubting him and then accepting him. They were ready for him and then cheering for him. All questions about the franchise surviving after the fall of the Soviet Union were swept away. Cultural concerns about Bond surviving the 90s were addressed and put behind him. The new female M dressed him down, then showed real concern. The new Moneypenny gets her third wave jabs in, but still wants him. GoldenEye was a success on its own terms and on its own merits. People loved it. But it wasn't yet the legend and the icon of the franchise that it is today. For it to get there, something else had to happen. Something nobody on planet Earth saw coming. I understand there's light coming through the window on me that I can't block, so that's just the way it's going to be for the rest of the video. The story of GoldenEye 64 is absolutely fascinating, so I'm going to try not to get too sidetracked here. If I had just one word to describe the media landscape of my late childhood, it would be GoldenEye. And that has more to do with the game than the movie. For people who weren't there, it's hard to describe the pop culture impact of this game. If I meet another man within 3 years of my age and he grew up here in the United States, I know for a fact he played GoldenEye as a kid. And the way it turned GoldenEye into almost a brand unto itself is quite a funny thing too. I don't know when GoldenEye 64 was originally supposed to come out, but I'm quite certain it missed its original release date by a lot. The movie came out in November 1995. The game came out in August 1997, almost 2 years later. For a movie tie-in video game, that's horrible. But it had to be advertised, even if nobody thought it would be a success. So there were GoldenEye advertisements running almost 2 years after the movie came out. What makes it even more absurd is that Tomorrow Never Dies, Pierce Brosnan's second Bond movie, came out in December of 1997, which means there were GoldenEye 64 advertisements running just 4 months before Tomorrow Never Dies was released. It's almost unthinkable. The game did okay on release. It sold out really quick, but only because movie tie-in video games are never popular, and this one was. They didn't produce enough units. Word of mouth kept going and going and going. People loved the movie, but people loved the game even more. It became the most popular game on the Nintendo 64, outside of first-party titles like Mario or Zelda. But it didn't stop there. The word of mouth wasn't instant, and it didn't last only a few months. GoldenEye 64 sold more units for Christmas 1998 than it did for Christmas 1997. And for Christmas 1999, it outsold both previous Christmas seasons combined. The World Is Not Enough, Pierce's third Bond movie, hit theaters in November 1999. That means GoldenEye got a heavy marketing push in 1995 for the movie. GoldenEye 64 got a heavy marketing push in 1997, 4 months before Tomorrow Never Dies came out. And GoldenEye 64 reached its peak popularity right around the time The World Is Not Enough came out in 1999. The GoldenEye movie was good, but the GoldenEye game kept the title GoldenEye on the lips of the nation for half a decade following. You cannot buy this amount of publicity, and nobody would have been counting on it. If you know anything about video games, you know that to this day, universally, movie tie-in video games are bad, except this one. As I once heard someone put it, movie tie-in games aren't even supposed to be good, let alone revolutionary. GoldenEye 64 really did change gaming forever, for all sorts of reasons that aren't important for this video at all. But since I really want to tell you just a bit of it, basically it was a ragtag team of like 20 people, and only one of them had ever made a video game before. Nintendo bought the license to make a James Bond game, just on the off chance they wanted to do it. A company called Rare accepted the task to develop it, just on the off chance they wanted to do it. And a random programmer at Rare who heard a rumor they could make a James Bond game told the leadership, hey, I'd like to do that. Just on the off chance they would let him do it. And they did. I've linked a video down below in case you want more details. It's an amazing story. And so, James Bond's grand reopening was more successful than anyone could have imagined. To this day, Pierce Brosnan is the only Bond actor whose box office takes only went up. Each movie made more than the last, and he left at the top. None of the others can say that. And now we come back to Bond versus Bond. It's time to give Pierce Brosnan's first outing a rating so we can close out the season. I give GoldenEye 9 out of 10 commandments. There's nothing actively wrong with it. The tone just feels a hair generic. Comes with being a gold standard for 30 years, I guess. With the rating of GoldenEye, George is still in last with 4. Moore and Craig are tied for 4th at 7.5 each. Connery is in 3rd with 8. Brosnan is in 2nd with 9. And Timothy Dalton will stand as the leader at the end of this season with 10. Congratulations to Timothy Dalton. I'm eager to see how this all shakes out as we do more of these. To catch up on Bond vs. Bond, check out the playlist. This first season of Big Shot Critic, Bond vs. Bond, the first outings, is now concluded. Coming up next season is Monster Mash, starting with Jurassic Park. I've designed a fun competition for these games. It's not going to be just a simple score versus score. It's a little more than that, and you're going to like it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This season has been a pleasure. Sorry about these technical issues. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.